What's up Sega fans, it's Dan the Mega Driver of the Sega Guys here, and hey, 2025 has already blessed us with some astonishing Sega homebrew content. In this instance, a full and final version of a port of Sega's arcade classic Shinobi for the NeoGeo of all things was an extremely exciting way to start the year. NeoGeo MVS, AES and CD owners could delight in playing this legendary arcade experience on their SNK consoles. You can play it emulated too, but it's something that I personally found a little bit tricky. This week, Hoffman, the mastermind behind this port, released version 1.1, which he calls the final version as he moves onto his next project. So let's take a look at this special release, and if you need a little bit of help running it, like I did, there'll be a guide at the end to help you along. Shinobi was released by Sega in arcades in 1987 and was a response to, or at least it bared resemblance to, Namco's Rolling Thunder. It was a critical and commercial success, giving birth to one of Sega's most iconic franchises. There were home ports, though almost all of them had some form of concessions to accommodate for the hardware and home market. The NES and PC Engine versions, for example, are missing stages. Most iconic is Sega's own Sega Master System port, an absolute classic on the console, intelligently adapting the gameplay for the home audience, but adding a life bar and making hostage rescue optional while making the game more accessible does produce a different experience to that of the arcade. And then of course, there's the visual downgrade that comes with it. Don't get me wrong, it looks amazing for an 8-bit game, but obviously it comes short of Sega's epic Sega 16 board. Which is to be expected of course. The Master System was 3 years old at the time of this port, and even the Mega Drive would come just shy of a perfect port of the arcade version, with results likely similar to games like Golden Axe and Altered Beast. But what if there was hardware that could give you an arcade perfect port of Shinobi and was playable in the home? Well, in 1990, SNK released the NeoGeo MVS in arcades and AES for home rentals. When demand in Japan suggested that there was a market to buy this luxury console, it was made available to purchase in 1991 for around $650. At that price, as you'd expect, it was the most powerful games console available at the time, and while not built for the mass market, it was tailor-made for arcade games, and the hardware design meant that SNK's games were identical in the arcade and at home. SNK furnished their hardware with some absolute classics, but how would it have handled some of Sega's arcade classics of the era? Well, thanks to the developer known as Hoffman, we now know, as a full port of Shinobi was recently released on Hoffman's itch.io site. Just last week, Hoffman updated the game to version 1.1, which he has called the final release, and that's the version that you are seeing here. What we have is a full port of Shinobi to the NeoGeo hardware. I'd use the term arcade perfect, though technically it's porting an arcade game to what is, in reality, different arcade hardware. That said, don't take the challenge in creating this port for granted, as while in terms of raw power, the NeoGeo and the Sega 16 board may be similar, there are a number of differences in their makeup that would make an accurate conversion very difficult. That Hoffman has delivered a complete port is an absolutely phenomenal achievement. The game is pretty much identical to the Sega 16 original. All of the stages, missions and bosses are there, enemy placement and stage design is pretty much a match, and the music and audio design also sounds completely accurate. This is the same Shinobi that you know and love. Great to look at, fun to play, but extremely challenging. Don't think that because this has come onto different hardware that you'll get an easier ride, oh no. At the same points in the game, this will get mercilessly hard, right down to having to beat the final mission with a single credit. That is, unless you use one of the additional options that Hoffman has included. You can access these options in the game's service menu. This is achievable in MAME by default by pressing the F2 key, though unfortunately I've got no insight on how you would go about that on real NeoGeo hardware. These options let you continue on stage 5 and give you additional ninja magic and so on. Without these options though, it is very much identical to the arcade original. In order to produce such an accurate conversion, Hoffman disassembled the original games back to their source code, and for this reason even the game logic and enemy behaviours are a match for the System 16 original. Seasoned Shinobi veterans can enjoy attempting to one-critic complete a version of the game that's effectively brand new, but also exactly as they remember. For Shinobi newbies or people that just aren't very good at the game, like me, you have a version that's worth trying out for the first time, or at least practicing with, especially for those of us who need to practice Stage 5 en route to that fabled 1cc. Either way, Shinobi is and remains a classic, and this NeoGeo version is an exceptional way to experience it. So, with that established, how do you go about playing it? Hoffman really has gone out of his way to make this game as accessible as possible. You can play Shinobi on any NeoGeo hardware. Have an SD loader or a flash cart? There's a specific ROM included. A NeoGeo CD? Yep, there's the required queue and bin files required to create a disc to play on your hardware. But what if, like me, you never got your hands on NeoGeo hardware? What if a NeoGeo has always eluded you? Usually, the answer is emulation. Load up your favourite emulator, pop in the ROM board and you're good to go. Only it's not so simple. The easiest thing to do for me at first seemed to be to load the CD image into a NeoGeo emulator. But as you can see from the footage, the image didn't appear to have any tracks and just simply would not play. Now I'm going to put this down to user error here. I have little to no experience with NeoGeo emulation outside of MAME, and probably didn't have my Nebula or RetroArch set up properly. But still, I just couldn't get it working. So I took Hoffman's suggestion, who responded to my cry for help in minutes by the way, of loading the ROM in MAME. This works, but it did take some effort to get it going. So if you're not familiar with the sort of jiggery pokery required to get ROM hacks running in MAME, here's a little guide. First of all, download MAME itself if you haven't already. The latest version can be found on the MAME website. Download it and extract it to a location of your choice. Next, unzip your download of NeoGeo Shinobi. Go to the MAME emulator folder and the directory called mslug2. What I did next was take all the files in that folder and zip them back up, calling the new zipped file mslug2. Then, copy that mslug2.zip file into MAME in your ROMs folder, overriding your Metal Slug 2 ROM set if it exists already. The next bit is important. You will need the NeoGeo BIOS files in MAME. If you've got the full library of ROMs, you're all set, but if not, you'll need to download it, and unfortunately we can't share that file, but it's easy enough to find. Now you're all set. All you need to do is load MAME and the Shinobi ROM masquerading as Metal Slug 2. To do this though, you will need to load MAME through command line or PowerShell. First, change your directory to where you unzipped MAME via the command cd and then your file path. With the directory changed, type in mame.exe to reference the program, then type mslug2 so that MAME loads that specific file. This is necessary so that MAME ignores the checksum errors that will appear. And that's it, you can now play NeoGeo Shinobi on MAME. I'm hoping that this helps out a few people who weren't familiar with these sort of steps, in the same way that I wasn't. For me, going through this was entirely worthwhile. Yes, if you're loading MAME, you can play the original Sega 16 version of Shinobi, and while this version for the NeoGeo is nigh on identical, it is still very much worth your time in my opinion. Firstly, because the cheats and options help newcomers learn the later stages in the game. And secondly, any work such as this, with this level of care and quality, deserves to be enjoyed by Sega fans. So what's next for Hoffman? Golden Axe has been suggested as his next big project to be moved over to the NeoGeo. For now though, he has given us something truly special to enjoy. Shinobi has long been a Sega superstar, and with this fan project and a new official entry in the works, it feels like Sega's Premier Ninja is finally making a comeback. We'd love to hear what you think of this port, and if you've got any other emulation tips for those of us who just want to play this excellent homebrew port. If you've enjoyed this video, Don't forget to like and subscribe, as that really helps the channel. And until next time, fellow ninjas, we will see you on the Sega side.